welcome back to 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. I'm your host, Ben Gray. Joining us this week is Ms. Amanda Dudgeon.
Hello.
No advanced degree of any kind, correct?
Correct.
Did you go to college at least?
I did.
Like real college or like Christian college?
It's a Christian college, so
okay,
it's
so no, you didn't really go to college, okay. Well, that's okay. We're so glad to have you here. This week we are continuing our conversation about James. We are still in chapter 2 of James. And this week we are specifically talking about chapter 2, verses 14 through 17. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, "Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed," but has nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. So, Amanda, my first question for you today, of the 5 resources in Settlers of Catan, what is your favorite resource?
Stone and or iron is the same.
It is the same, I was going to say.
Like who you're
Because
talking
you don't call
to.
it ore? It's ore. You don't
Well,
you call it stone?
yes.
What do you call the one with the furry animal on it?
A sheep.
You call it sheep, you don't call it wool.
No.
So that's one of my questions about Settlers of Catan, because on Wikipedia, it lists ore, wood, brick, wheat, and then sheep. The other 4 are like the raw resource. They don't call it tree, it's wood. They don't call it clay, it's brick. But for the sheep, they call it sheep. Are we using the whole sheep in the process? Or is it just
I guess
the
if
wool?
they're eating it. See, but we also don't call it wheat in my family. We call it hay.
Okay, so the Dutchess are just weird.
Yeah.
You guys aren't
It's
playing-
like how before the Harry Potter movies came out, how everybody pronounced Hermione.
Hermione?
Hermione, he said Hermina. I think it's just, you just go with it.
Yeah. First actual question. This section of James chapter 2 talks a lot about faith. How do you define faith personally, like in your life? Is that a word that you use, faith?
That's a really interesting question. Growing up in more of a mainline tradition, I don't think that we necessarily used faith in the same way that maybe a more evangelical background has. It's just like it's part of the structure of church, but the way that I define faith is actually by not defining faith. Anne Lamott has this great quote, and she says, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty." And so that's kind of been my guiding principle. There's a lot of mystery to faith. I don't have it all figured out, and therefore I don't have a solid definition for what it is.
So with Anne Lamott's quote, that makes me wonder, the phrase, "I have faith in God," replacing the word faith in that sentence with Anne Lamott's definition would be, "I have doubt in God," or "I have a lack of certainty in God." Is that how you approach your understanding of Christianity?
Yeah, because there's just so much mystery. I mean, our little human brains can't even fathom the majesty and amazement that is God, or that is creation, or that is the resurrection. So there's so much unknown that I just have to lean into a trust and being okay with not knowing everything.
Not knowing for sure.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily doubting the existence of. It's the lack of certainty, as in lack of concrete certainty.
Yes.
But would you say that you are? Let me ask it this way: are there attributes of God that you do have certainty about?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Such as?
I know that God is love.
Okay.
I know that God is trust. I know that God is safety.
As James is discussing it here, he's talking about faith in contrast to deeds. Are there deeds that you are certain of that God calls you to do?
Throughout Scripture, I think we see examples of that, especially in the Gospels, because Jesus shows us how to live our faithful life. So by being generous, by being kind and compassionate and empathetic, especially to those people who don't look like us, who don't come from the same education or socioeconomic background as we do. And that's always the challenge, because it's easier to do those things for people who are like us.
Yes.
And it's much
That's where we're
harder.
comfortable.
This is where we're comfortable. It's much harder to reach across the fence or the table and offer that to somebody else.
What would be, can you give me an example of something that maybe you feel now or you felt in the past called to do that was outside of your comfort zone?
So a lot of people know that I recently moved to Oak Park. Oak Park is closer to Chicago. There's a greater presence of people who appear to be homeless or living on the streets in some capacity, and driving by those intersections, especially getting onto the expressway, people are panhandling, they're looking for any sort of resource that you can give them. I felt really, what's the word? Convicted.
Yeah.
To be driving my 2012 Honda, heading to work.
It's an Accord.
It is.
Not even a Civic. Don't just say Honda. You're driving like the luxury version of the Honda over there.
Yes.
That's a full back seat, ladies. Full back seat.
It does have great leg room.
It does.
But going to my job, and I'm living in a nice apartment, and I have the means to be generous, to do something. So that was a big conviction for me. So not to brag or sound like I've got my stuff figured out here, but it's been a practice now for me to pack an extra lunch and that way offer it to people. They can say, yes, I would love to receive that, or no, I don't want that. Just to be able to get something. Because I believe there is a quote where it says, even if you give the least of these a cool drink of water, you are serving me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to do.
What actions does God call us as his children to do? What is he asking us? What is the Christian equivalent of go into the vineyards and harvest the grapes?
I guess I turn back to the greatest commandment, love God, love neighbor.
As an action, what does that look like?
Well, love can be a verb in many different ways.
Yes.
So whether that is going and serving your time at St. Andrew's Food Pantry and sorting food for those who are in great need right now, whether that is pooling your resources and going on the Guatemala Habitat Bill that our church goes on every year. That could be coming on this show and sharing your knowledge of and your faith experiences so that teens in this community and who else may be watching this show are invested in growing in their faith. Love can take on many different forms.
So there's not a specific list of the 5 things you must do to get into heaven?
No, I don't believe that.
Okay, that's disappointing. I was looking for the 5 things. Okay, last question. How can we tell if our faith is dead? James says specifically that faith without works is dead. How do I know if my faith has died? How do I know if my faith was never alive in the first place? How do I know if I'm doing enough to have a living faith?
When we feel stagnant, when at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about like feeling uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we start feeling completely comfortable, our faith needs the light. A
defibrillator?
A defibrillator, thank you. You know what I
assume that's what you meant by
yes, like it needs a jolt, it needs something.
But it comes to mind as a question of, am I doing enough to demonstrate to God my gratitude for what he's done for me? I don't know. I don't believe that. Spoiler,
you're never going to get there.
Exactly, yes. I don't believe that we ever will. I don't believe that I'm ever going to get to the point. And I think that to your point, I think that's when we would know that there's something wrong in our faith, is when we get to the point where we feel like I've done enough. Mm-hmm. I've paid back God for what he's done for me. Mm-hmm. You can never return what God has given us. Anything you give back to him was his in the first place.
There was a moment when you were talking where I was really trying to suppress a burp. I was really nervous it was going to come out.
This has been another week of 10 Feet Away from Ben Gray. I am doing the conclusion now so that we can't possibly cut what Amanda just said. Thank you so much to Amanda Dudgeon for joining us this week.
having me.
Don't forget to check out the questions included with the video packet. If you're interested in joining us for one of these weeks, please let me know. I'm really scraping the bottom of the proverbial barrel, and you can see. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great week.
Cross his legs like
How do
this.
you do? Can you do that? Yeah. Do I just have like the fattest thighs in the world that I can't?
Can't
And
get all
you
that.
can't.
I can do it. It's very uncomfortable, and it really
That's
is
the
like.
chair.